everyone. My name is Christine. I am the communications coordinator contractor with South Dakota Specialty Producers. Thank you for joining our event on how to extend your growing season, presented by Liz Graznak of Happy Hollow Farms. This segment is funded by a partnership with the Natural Resources Conservation Service and South Dakota Specialty Producers to promote sustainable agriculture practices and environmental stewardship. Thanks for joining us, Liz.
Absolutely. I'm thrilled to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, can you tell our viewers a little bit about who you are, where you're from, and what you do?
Yes. So I'm just going to dive into this presentation because I do talk about that kind of stuff at the very beginning. I just want to start by saying, usually I like to try and have presentations be super interactive and a little bit maybe more of like a discussion between the folks that are participating and then myself. But because of the way the PowerPoint is set up and because of my inability to be super technologically advanced, I think it'll be easier if I just go through the presentation. And if you have questions and thoughts that come up during the presentation, write them down so that we can 100% come back to them at the end, because I definitely left plenty of time that we can have a conversation at the end. But yeah, so I'm gonna dive in and get started. We're gonna talk about extending the flower growing season. And I'm assuming that in South Dakota, and I'm very interested to hear from you guys, that you have a very different growing season than I have in mid-Missouri. I'm in zone 5B-ish. But most importantly, for extending the flower season, the date that I'm interested to know what your all's date is. But I want to know what the Persephone period is for you guys. I want to know what what day of the year is the last day of the year that you start to have like 9 to 10 hours of sunlight a day. And, you know, for me, it's around the 10th, 9th, 11th-ish, around in that time of November. But I'm interested to know for you guys, what day of the year that is for you all, because that day, that period of the year is what significantly affects your ability to continue growing into the fall and winter growing flowers. And that's the day of the year that I base my entire planting schedule for the whole season around. So we'll talk about that at the end. But for right now, let's move forward with the slide, and I'll just tell you a little bit about my farm. So I have Happy Hollow Farm. I'm in central Missouri. The whole farm is 82 acres, and I'm currently growing on about 11 acres. I did expand into a 16-acre field that's across the road from me that I'm renting from a neighbor. And I started that expansion this spring. I am certified organic, also Real Organic Project certified. I have about an acre in an orchard of mixed trees, apples, pears, one plum that never fruits. It always gets frosted every single spring. And I'm now growing in extensive undercover, high tunnels and caterpillar tunnel production, a lot of square footage in covered space, which is required in order to grow year round here in mid-Missouri. And I don't just grow flowers, I grow a lot of vegetables. But I would say it's hard to sort of quantify really. Maybe a quarter of the amount that we have in production is in flowers, I would say. So, okay, let's go forward. All right, so my objectives with trying to approach extending the flower season are maybe, well, people want to have beautiful things all year long. And unless you're willing to heat tunnels all year long, through the winter, especially, you really won't have things blooming all year long. So heat is expensive. Heat is very expensive. I personally like to take a little bit of a break in the winter. But early in the spring is a key period to have flowers, because that's when people start to get really excited about having color again. And in order to have those really early spring blooms, you have to be planting a lot in the fall. And it probably, I would think for you guys, some winters, it does for me, requires a little bit of heat in my heated high tunnels. I'm farming full time. This is my living. This is what I do for a living. I have many employees that I have to keep employed through the whole year. And so cash flow is extremely important for me. And so having flowers as many months of a year is also really important, because if you are growing and selling flowers, you know that they do generate pretty good income. Okay, go forward. All right. So like I was saying, tunnels and more tunnels, really, really important. I have now 4 what I consider to be high tunnels. The tunnel that's in the picture, that is a 34-foot wide by 200-foot long Zimmerman made high tunnel. It's got a Gothic roof. All of my high tunnels are this construction, but not all of them are the same length. Some of them are one of them shorter. You know, I put them up earlier in my farming career. But my most recent big high tunnels are this size. This is the tunnel that I have that's dedicated 100% and solely to flower production. I also do a lot of caterpillar tunnels and then outside production as well. But I depend on this tunnel specifically for those really, really early spring blooms, because I also have heat in this tunnel. The tunnels that have heat in them have a double layer of greenhouse poly with an inflated fan that keeps the double layer inflated. And so, yeah, maintaining temperature is really important. Row cover is always a fight because of, you can see there's stakes and net, and row cover with the stakes and with the net and with flowers, keeping them going through the winter, it's a real hassle. And I don't have a good solution to that. We've tried many different things. None of them are really great. So we're working on ideas. I'm not interested in heating all winter long because heat is very, very expensive. And so my access to heat in these tunnels is only for emergency type situations. That's my hope, is only for like emergency type situations. But that means that we have to mess with row cover, and I have to mess with it a lot. We also, of course, we fight weeds. I use a lot of weed mat. I use a lot of straw mulch in the pathways. That really helps keep weeds down in the pathways. We have bad mice and vole problems. Maybe you guys have lots of mice and voles also, but man, do we have a lot. We actually are in one of our beds. We've planted twice now. Yeah, twice. With some of our fall planted snapdragons, and they just keep devouring them. So we're gonna rip that whole bed up. Actually, we're gonna rip the stuff that is in that bed. We're gonna rip it out and see if we can't get the rodent population under control so that we can get some things planted, because it's time for us right now in Missouri. It's time for us to start planting our fall crops, and then also some of our crops that are going to get us into next spring. Light, like, again, I'm not interested in crazy measures to try and get things blooming. I have some farmer friends that are here in Missouri that are harvesting flowers in the middle of December, January, February. And that requires constant heat. It also requires a constant source of light and light interruption. And I will show you some pictures in a couple of slides about that and what they're doing to to keep their things blooming. Obviously, you have to keep a super rigid planting schedule. And I have a crazy Excel spreadsheet that I use to manage and keep track of what is getting planted and where and which year and what time of the year, because it gets nuts because we're planting and growing so many different things. Okay, let's go to the next slide. This is an example of just a caterpillar tunnel that's inside one of my high tunnels. And these cat tunnels work great, especially for the produce that I grow, but they don't work great because of the wooden stakes. So what do I want to say? But tunnels inside of tunnels is how I keep things from freezing. And it's super important in order to have stuff growing and I'd say thriving through the winter months. And I would think even more so for you guys. Okay, next page. This is a photo of some caterpillar tunnels that we have that are outside that we use definitely spring, summer, and fall, but also I'm using more and more now for late fall planted crops that really all I need for them to do is survive through the winter, not die. And then they're going to come on earlier in the spring. I would imagine you guys couldn't get away with PVC pipe caterpillar tunnels. And there are some winters that I can't get away with PVC pipe caterpillar tunnels. And so actually I've been moving to metal cat tunnels that are a little bit sturdier, built slightly different. But I still do have and am still currently actively using these PVC tunnels. But I am moving away from using them. So, okay, let's go to the next one. This is just an example of, so the top left photo is my tunnel. And that is a very large propane, it's like 22,000 BTU, I think, propane heater that I have in my picture on the right is door wood burning stove that my friend Ethan uses to
Oh, Liz, we lost you. You were saying the stove that your friend, then it cut out. And it seems like you're still frozen.
I'm not doing that yet. Thank goodness.
You just came back, Liz. You've been cut out.
Yeah.
We lost you when you said your friend's heater, your friend Ethan's heater, and then we lost you.
Oh, so probably my Wi-Fi. Sorry. That picture on the right is just a picture of an outdoor wood burning stove. That is how my friend Ethan heats many of his high tunnels that he's growing flowers in. And that's how he heats them for the winter. And the picture on the bottom left is a picture of the temperature sensors that I have that are in all of my tunnels that I use to monitor the temperatures, not only in my high tunnels, but also in my coolers and in my pack shed and like literally all of the places around the farm that I want to know what the temperature is at a certain given time. I mean, I've got, I don't know, 10 maybe temperature sensors throughout the farm. Okay, let's go to the next slide. So if you guys are familiar with the joys of managing row cover, you know that sometimes it totally makes you crazy. It makes me crazy sometimes. But to have flowers alive, keeping them alive through the winter months, unless you're going to just heat your tunnel like crazy, having row cover and managing row cover is a must. And pretty much it becomes a daily task of covering and uncovering, you know, twice a day, your tunnels and your rows of things that you have that are growing through the winter. Because if you don't uncover stuff, then moisture builds up inside the tunnel, and moisture builds up on the leaves of the plants, and then you start to have fungus problems and pest infestation, explosion problems, and all the things that go along with too much moisture. So you really have to learn to love and to be able to manage row cover during the winter months if you're going to have flowers through the winter. Okay, next slide. So I mentioned our rodent problem that we're having currently right now. It usually is the biggest problem in the winter because the voles and the moles and the mice, they like places that are enclosed where it's dark. And usually under the row cover, that's what they love. So we've come up with these, it's a tackle box, plastic, super cheap tackle boxes that we use, and you drill a hole in the sides and you put 2 mouse traps inside there, and they are very effective at catching even voles and moles, because those guys do come up out of the ground and they smell the peanut butter that I put in the traps. So they do come up out of the ground, and they work really well to catch these rodents that literally constantly battling. The top left picture is some relatively newly planted ranunculus, and oh boy, the rodents just love those corms. Oh, and it's devastating to come out to the tunnel and just see, because the plants just sort of wither, they wilt down to nothing because their roots have been eaten and the corm has been eaten, and you can very quickly see where there's been a tunnel that's been dug underneath the bed. It's very disheartening. Okay, next photo. This picture, this slide shows you an example of this tunnel is my friend Ethan's tunnel, and how he is using lights inside the tunnel in order to keep things blooming in the depths of winter. And mostly it's not about having enough light for the day length, but it's about tricking the plants to make them think that it's daytime. And so he does that by interrupting the length of the night with an hour of light. So he's got his light set on a timer. And can you flip through and like bring up yeah, there we go. Yeah, perfect. So the lights are just on a timer, and in the middle of the night for 1 hour, the lights come on and they trick the plants into thinking that it's daytime. His temperatures, like he's holding his tunnels at 50 degrees. And all of the things that are going in this tunnel, and he's got dahlias in here, snapdragons, celosia. He's got ranunculus and anemones in these tunnels. He's planting just like I am, starting in early August and then going to probably the latest that we would be wanting to put stuff in the ground in these tunnels would be early September. But that's how he's doing it, to keep harvesting flowers all winter long. Okay, let's go to the next slide. Again, you guys are probably on a pretty different planting schedule than we are here in Missouri. But for us, we've got plants that we started in our greenhouse at the beginning of July, pretty much, and that are now ready for us to start transplanting. We have been really, really dry all year. It started raining this week. And so we're going to be a little late on our planting schedule, because really I'd like to be planting stuff outside right now. And big rains in July and early August is not normal for us. Really not normal at all. But this year, everything feels like it's been like a month early, sort of starting back in April. So who knows what's going on with the weather, but we're going to be late getting started with our planting for fall stuff, just because of all these rains that have happened this week. But that's okay. I think we'll be fine. What else do I want to tell you about that? Yeah, late July, early July for starting the seeds and things that we want to be starting to plant out in early August through the rest of this month. Okay, let's go to the next. Like I said, I keep a really detailed Excel spreadsheet that is to the next slide. Did I lose you?
You're
You
cutting
kind
out
of-
just a little bit, Liz.
Now we can't hear you.
Are
All-
you there?
Oh, now you're unfrozen.
We love technology.
All right, we can
Are
see
y'all
you.
back?
Yep.
Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay, great. I was just saying that I keep a really detailed Excel spreadsheet, and that's how I keep track of what I plant, where it gets planted, and then also I guess maybe from year to year how much I'm planting of each thing. So I can like calculate how much bed space I need for each of the crops. That helps me with my planning also. The things that I am successful in growing through the winter months are ranunculus, anemones, snapdragons, foxglove, dianthus, bells of Ireland, cerinthe, rudbeckia, poppies. I've done poppies before. I think that's about the list of the things that do really well here for me. And I have tulips on there. And I do grow a lot of tulips. I also grow a lot of lilies, but most of the tulips that I grow for forcing, I grow in bulb crates and I don't grow in the ground. And those I just put in my tunnel, the bulb crates I just put in my tunnels and manage them, through the winter in the tunnels. Okay, let's go to the next slide. That's just a good picture of a big sheet of row cover that's over the little mini tunnels that are inside my big high tunnel. Okay. And another list of some of these things are ones that are not, that I'm not, let's see, for example, so I don't grow poppies anymore. Delphinium. So I fall plant delphinium and I fall plant lisianthus. And I fall plant snapdragons and bells of Ireland and rudbeckia in order to have real early spring blooms. Statice doesn't do great for me over wintering, but it does wonderfully in tunnels. So I plant it usually in February. I was really, so growing, I started growing chrysanthemums 2 years ago, and these are all heirloom varieties of really big flowered chrysanthemums. And they did great. And I left them in my high tunnel last winter and they died back down to the ground, but the plants didn't die because it doesn't freeze in the tunnels. And they came back beautifully this spring. And now probably what my biggest concern is that the plants are going to get so big that they're going to have to be divided. I have the same problem with tuberose, for example, which also I don't have to dig in my high tunnels because the ground doesn't freeze in there. But I have to dig those up every 3 years in order to just divide the clump so it doesn't get too crowded and then stop blooming. I've had really good luck growing eucalyptus and keeping it as a perennial crop from year to year, but I lost pretty much all of them last winter. I don't know why. It was not a hard winter. But I pretty much lost that entire bed, and that was a real bummer because normally like this time of the year, I'd be harvesting off of really big, beautiful eucalyptus plants. And I hardly have any this year. So we reseeded and have started new baby plants, but they're not going to be big enough to really harvest off of until next year. So that was a bummer. Okay, let's go to the next slide. So some perennials that I grow a lot of daffodils, some hyacinth. I grow a lot of tulips, a lot of forcing tulips and bulb crates. I'm putting this year a pretty good patch of peonies in. I really have not delved into the peony craze yet. I grow a lot of hellebore and 9-bark, and we have a invasive, really. It is an invasive woody shrub that's called autumn olive. That is a really great filler. It has a really nice waxy leaf, not very big. It looks really nice in bouquets. And I just cut it from the roadsides. And I've also started, I put in a pretty good sized planting of some hydrangeas this summer. So they'll start blooming next year, but we'll probably give them 2 years and they'll really kick into gear. Okay. So I don't want anyone to think that growing in the winter is easy, because it's really hard. It does take time. It's stressful. It's stressful mentally, like, because things happen that you maybe are off the farm and you can't get back to the farm to fix the problem. And the how do I say this? The impact of the problem is much more significant than it is during the spring and summer months. Because more often than not, the problem has to do with the cold, and the cold is immediately damaging. So it makes it a lot harder to be off the farm in the winter, I think. And monitoring the temperature is, I mean, you're constantly thinking about temperature and moisture, whereas during the spring and summer, you cannot worry about it quite as much. So even though I would say during the winter months, the physical work is less, the mental strain and the mental pressure, I think, is a lot more. So that's an interesting sort of flip of things that you have to think about and that you're worried about all the time. And if you do lose something, it's usually a pretty expensive loss, which is also stressful. And then, you know, if you're growing in the winter, like, you don't get a break. And a lot of farmers rely on that break. You know, I can't. I have employees. I'm doing this for a living. So, you know, I'm working year round. But that's just some of the challenges, things that you got to think about if you really are wanting to, if you're wanting to grow in the winter months. Okay, let's go to the next slide. So lots of benefits too. There are always, especially at the farmer's market, there are always summer vendors that come in for a couple of months with inexpensive flowers like zinnias and sunflowers, and they sell them really cheap. And celosia, that's another one. And it's competition for us. And if you can build up a good clientele and a good customer base, they'll stick with you. And they'll stick with you because you have a high quality product year round, and you don't have to go out and find more customers or find new customers every year if you have things throughout the year. So, you know, yes, it gives you a good steady stream of income, and it has, I would say 100%, as I started having more production through the winter months, it has 100% helped my business sustainability, I would say. Okay, let's keep going. Mother's Day is absolutely the highest sales day of the year. any florist, any grocery store florist, anybody growing flowers anywhere would tell you that. And if you're growing flowers to try and make a living, then you must have flowers on Mother's Day. And having flowers on Mother's Day requires all of this preparation and planting work that I've been talking about that happens right now in August and early September. And for you guys might even be like into July, early August. So, Mother's Day absolutely is my highest sales day of the year, because of all the flowers that we sell. Okay. And I think that we've now hit and talked on all of the major high points of the things that I wanted to talk about regarding extending your cut flower growing season. So I saw lots of questions popping up in the chat, although I can't see the chat. So maybe there's a lot of questions that we can have a nice discussion now.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. That was very interesting, and just, the realness of, hey, winter is winter, and it's gonna come with some heartbreak, right?
Yep.
But it's fascinating to follow along and see that. We do have a few questions in the chat, but let me first kind of go through with that. I was enticed by what you were saying, so
no worries.
Yeah, we do have quite a few flower growers on with us, from all across the state.
Great.
Yeah, and so it's great. I think rodent issues, somebody mentioned that you, Jenny from Custer mentioned maybe get a herd of cats. It's amazing how they have left or gotten eaten / killed just having a cat around. Do you have any cats on your farm?
My problem is, can you hear me still? I moved back to my office. Let's see if that's all. So because I grow vegetables, and because my tunnels are not right near my house, I have 9 cats. I got a lot of cats. But I can't have my cats going in my tunnels where there's produce being grown. And I don't know anybody that's been able to train a cat to be able to tell the difference between a flower tunnel and a vegetable tunnel. So I 100%, I would love to do that. I'd have to lock my cats in that tunnel, I think, in order to keep them in there to try to eliminate the problem. And that's not a bad idea, especially I could do it kind of right now. But they would probably be mad at me.
They might find a way out, knowing how cats operate.
They would probably rip a hole in the side of one of the plastic in the sidewall or something.
It's kind of like there's always going to be a new challenge for them to discover. Jenny
but I like that idea. I might try that. I'm not opposed to that.
Yeah, I mean, conditioning a cat, I've never done it. I don't know if I've heard it done, but maybe with the right cat you could get it trained pretty well. Jenny has a few other questions here. So she's also interested in your airflow heat distribution.
Okay.
In such a long tunnel, how do you keep the heat low in a tall, high tunnel?
So let me see if I can, all the pictures that I have in here, I'm flipping through the photos that I put in here. I have circulation fans in all of my tunnels now. The big tunnels that are 200 foot long have 8 fans in them, 4 fans on each side. The 4 on one side are facing one direction, and the 4 on the other side are facing another direction. And those keep the air moving in the tunnel. And I have the plan to install this winter some inflatable plastic tubes that are vented on the ground, like in the pathways underneath. So if you could, can you pull up and show them the photo that shows the big long tunnel, but it's a big sheet of row cover inside the tunnel underneath the hoops?
Yes, just give me a quick second.
So I can explain it anyway. So I I am planning on putting these heat vent tubes in a couple of the pathways in this tunnel. And I'm going to pump the heat through those tubes underneath the row cover. That's my plan. I hope it works. It could not work. I do have to come up with a way of keeping the row cover over the beds, because the plants get really tall in these tunnels. And I don't right now have, I mean, this picture is of vegetables. And obviously, you know, those hoops are not super tall, but the hoops that I need to put in the tunnel where the flowers are, I need to put some kind of like taller hoop that could keep the row cover over the height of the flowers, I guess. And I've literally been talking to a couple of my guys on my crew about this particular issue and trying to figure out a good way to manage this, because you still have to be able to move the row cover on and off. Whatever it is that we put above these beds, we still have to be able to move the row cover on and off.
Jenny
So-
had a follow-up question. Could you install or place big inflated tubes in the rafters of the high tunnel to fill that space with the air?
Yeah,
volume?
sure you could, but I don't care about heating the rafters. I care about heating the space underneath the row cover, because that's where the plants are, you know, and the heat is very expensive, very, very expensive. So I don't care if it's cold up high. I want it to be warm down where the plants are and down at the ground level.
That makes sense. I
Yeah.
cringe at heating my house during the winter, so I can only
Right.
imagine.
Right.
But yeah, that was very informative. And she had one last question. Do you use heat sinks, black plastic, black barrels, hardscapes like in your past or anything like that?
So the only thing that we use is the black weed mat that's in our beds.
Can you explain kind of what that does in your process?
Yeah, so let's go up to, see if I can find a photo that really shows it super well. The photo that is, it talks about row cover and my mind is exploding. That one has a really good photo of some weed mat with some very young foxglove plants. That one right there. So, I mean, I'm sure your flower growers, if any, or even vegetable growers are probably familiar with weed mat, but it's black. We use it to help control weed pressure. It also really, really helps to keep the ground a lot warmer in the winter, because it does, you know, get warmer when the sun is out. And you can, I mean, you can see how the plugs are planted in the hole. We burn holes in the weed mat. And so then the flowers are planted in those holes. There's some weeds you can see, there's chickweed in a couple of those holes. But we use a lot of weed mat.
It seems like you're a very busy person. And so you've talked a few times about how this is your full-time gig. You have
Yep.
employees, you know. How many employees are you able to keep around for your operation?
So there are 9 employees on the farm today. And in the winter, I have 2 full-time and 2 part-time. But at the peak of the season, you know, right now there's nine folks.
That's amazing. So do you have an estimate of maybe how many flowers you grow in a season?
I'm sorry, I don't.
Just a lot.
A lot. Yeah.
Well, that kind of concludes our question segment. And I just want to thank you, Liz, again for sharing your knowledge and teaching us how we could maybe extend our growing period for flowers. For more information, for those of you following on Facebook Live, we have commented Liz's website. So if you want to connect with her or learn more about her farm, go check it out. This is a really interesting operation, and aspiring flower growers or somebody who's maybe been in the business, maybe you could share some tips And so again, this segment has been funded by a partnership with NRCS and the specialty producers to promote sustainable agriculture practices and environmental stewardship. My name is Christine Reiner. I'm the communications coordinator contractor for the specialty producers. And if you would like to stay on top of our events or upcoming, grants, any information, resources we have, please feel free to visit our website at sdspecialtyproducers.org. I just want to thank you again for everyone who participated, who asked questions. This has been a really fun segment. I am in Sioux Falls, I'm in a city, so I'm not a producer yet, but there's that dream of the acreage. So I just want to thank you again, Liz.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And then we'll transition now into our specialty producers flower grower meetup. So if you are an SDSPA member, please stay on. And Liz, if you have a few minutes, if you want to stay on in case.
do.
I know sometimes in a larger group, even though it feels small, people might be hesitant to ask a question. So
Yeah.
I'll have a few minutes if that's all right with you to discuss. And then I'll put the agenda for our meeting in the chat.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm more than happy to stay on for a few minutes if people want to talk more.
And yes, Sienna, it is recorded, so this will be available. But I guess we'll probably stop. Well, I guess we'll keep the recording from this point forward. But anything recorded from here on will just be within our membership. So I put the agenda in the chat, but for the sake of using Liz's time most efficiently, let's hold off on doing our introduction time until we spend a little bit of time just reflecting on the discussion or having some discussion on Liz's presentation. What thoughts came to mind? I know one question that kind of was going through my head is a lot of the examples you gave were for what works in Missouri. And of course, you brought up that we are in a different growing zone. What do you think you might do differently? Or do you have any thoughts or ideas that you've heard from people in a little bit further northern climates?
Well, honestly, I don't know any flower growers that are growing up where it's really cold.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure there are some, but I don't know any. And I would imagine that it 100% would require heat.
Yep. For our members who are on, has anyone done any little bit more season extension? Maybe not to that extreme level of going fully year round, but
this is Sienna. I do have a high tunnel and I've tried to extend my season. The past 2 years, I did not use heat and it was pretty tough. Yeah, like when it got warm in the winter, on winter days, like obviously the heat increased in there pretty drastically, but then at nights, like I couldn't keep it more than a couple degrees above exterior. So I think without heat, it's pretty, it's pretty tough.
Were you able to keep the ground from freezing inside the tunnel?
Yes. So the ground, it didn't ever freeze. But I did plant like ranunculus, and thought that my ground was hot, like warm enough to stay, and then got some cold snaps and it still zapped them. So they all like froze and rotted in the ground, but it never actually froze hard, I guess.
So I have to use multiple layers of row cover.
Yeah.
Do you do that?
I did. I used 2 layers of, I'm not for sure what like weight it was, but it was a higher weight. I used 2 layers. And one thing I think I'll try differently is I planted them on an outer, like an outer edge of my high tunnel. And the stuff that was a little bit closer interior
inside
survived longer. Like I got a couple of those to grow up. But the stuff a little bit closer to the sidewalls that froze harder. So yeah. But it did allow me, I mean, as far as like a season extension standpoint, it did allow me to get in there earlier, work the soil earlier. It still did extend my season some, but definitely not like year round. I have more luck in the fall, just protecting from the kind of one-off freeze days than the spring was rough. Yeah.
Hi, Liz. I'm It's Christine. I'm back. We did have a few questions in our Facebook Live, and I hope I'm not interrupting anything. I popped off. But there's a few here. So one of them was, do you dabble with dried flowers at all? Is there a market for that?
I think there is a market, and no, I do not.
Okay.
The farm has grown so much in the last few years that I really need a full-time person that all they do is manage the flower part of the farm. And I had a full-time person for 3 years who worked for me, and she moved on this last year. And I've hired another woman, but she's brand new, and it just is going to take a while for her to, learn all the things. And if she's interested, in dried flowers, then we might think about that like for next year. But it really is going to require, if I'm going to take on something else, it's going to require somebody else managing it because I can't right now.
All right. That's, you're a very busy woman. So I completely understand that. Another question was, do you have any suggestions for beginners in the cut flower producers and how they can take their production from next level to make it a full-time job instead of just a hobby? And then the last question is, do you have some type of cold storage facility you use before selling your cut flowers?
Oh yeah, I've got 2 walk-in coolers set at different temperatures based on the flowers that go in them. So yes, and actually this year my whole crew has been saying, we need another cooler. We need another cooler. So we have it. It's on the plans. We're going to build this winter another flower cooler.
Nice.
What temperatures do you have those 2 at?
I have one set at 40 and one set at 55.
Thanks.
So let's see. The cooler question. What was the other one about?
Any suggestions for somebody wanting
going the next level?
Yeah.
My very, very, very first suggestion would be to make sure that you have the market in order to sell the volume of flowers that you would need to sell in order to make it a full-time living. And identifying that market it's hard. Do you have enough wholesale florists that are interested in a high quality product that they're willing to pay more for and buy from you consistently? Do you have that? Do you have a farmer's market that has a volume of customers with expendable income that are interested in buying flowers? Do you have that? Do you have a partner that has an off-farm job? Yeah. I mean, flowers 100% do make good money per square foot, but you have to sell a lot of flowers to be able to make it a full-time income. And, do you have the customer base to be able to support that volume? Like, that's the first question.
Thank you. That was a great answer.
Yeah.
Any other questions? It's just a small group now, so if you want to turn on your camera and visit.
This is Sienna again. I missed the first part of your discussion, so if you reviewed this, I apologize, but do you use shade cloth in the summer?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Okay. I actually have 30% shade on my tunnels. And in the fall, like right now, we planted last week or 2 weeks ago, we planted Lysianthus, and over that bed inside the tunnel, we hang another layer of 30% shade cloth over the bed. Because, last week it was 103 degrees here.
Yeah.
Holy God. Yeah. So yeah, 100%. We use a lot of shade cloth.
Hi, this is Jenny from Custer, South Dakota. At the beginning of the conversation, you were talking about the length of days, the length of daylight hours that you have. yours was 9 hours or 10 hours at your cutoff? What was the?
Actually, I think it's like 11 hours.
Okay.
My days in the realm of, it's like the 9th, 10th, 11th of November.
And I just
And
looked
that is
at our,
when,
in our zip code, what our daylight hours were for sunrise, sunset. And it's looking like that 11-hour is somewhere in early October. So we're about
early October.
Yeah.
That's like a month earlier than me.
Mhm.
So what that means is you have to have your you have to have your fall planted crops planted and established and actively growing and close to blooming by that day. Because what's going to happen is when you reach that period, things are going to stop growing pretty much. I mean, they're going to grow a little bit, but not a whole lot. And
but there you're really looking just to keep those plants alive through the winter so that they're ready to go in the spring.
Exactly right. That's right. So if we were talking about, because I also grow vegetables, I grow a lot of vegetables. So if we're talking about kale or lettuce or spinach, I want those crops to be pretty darn close to being able to be harvested, because they're going to just hold in that state of ready to be harvested. As long as I can keep them from freezing, they're going to hold there for a long time, many, many, many weeks. But if they're not close to being harvestable size at that point, they're not going to really get much bigger in the end of November, December, January.
So then you're not really, after a while, you're not harvesting much. And so you're kind of so that Valentine's Day isn't going to happen for flowers.
Oh, so I don't even try to hit Valentine's Day. Yeah. Not at all, because it would require me heating my tunnels a lot. Mm-hmm. And I'm not ready to do that. Yeah, Valentine's Day is totally out for me. Mother's Day, you betcha.
Any other questions to pick Liz's brain? And I assume you're open to season extension or otherwise questions.
Anything, you bet.
I have one other question. Are you considering a wood burning stove like your friend had?
I am not right now. I don't want to say like never, right? I try to not do that. But I'm not. I have I heat my house with an outdoor wood burning stove, and it's like as much as I can manage right now. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I don't really want to have more outdoor wood burning stoves that I have to manage through the winter. Did that come through?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, good. Yeah.
This is Sienna. I apologize again if maybe this was
no
covered,
worries.
I was in another meeting, so I missed a lot of the beginning. But if there were like a couple varieties that if we were to try to do like the season extension or the or like hold over winter, like if there were maybe 3 varieties or something, what would you start with on choose, which ones would you choose?
Okay, who are you selling to?
Mostly I sell direct to consumer and just a little
customers.
Yeah.
Okay. I would grow ranunculus and anemones. They're sort of in the same.
Yep.
Yeah. Snapdragons. And.
So when you say ranunculus and anemones, would you start them in the?
Say again.
Usually I start them in the spring, not the fall.
Ranunculus and anemones.
Yeah.
Okay,
I'm
so
talking
I
about
fall
things you would
plant,
start like now, have them growing by our October date and then hold until fall. Like you're talking about kale and spinach and lettuce, like what, like flowers, like would like Lysianthus, snapdragon, like which flowers would do that the best, do you think? Or the
no,
most hardy?
don't do Lysianthus.
Okay.
Unless you're gonna heat your tunnel, they won't live through the winter.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm gonna, it's my thing is like breaking up just a little bit, so I'm gonna move and see if my Wi-Fi gets a tiny bit better. Snapdragons are really hardy, so I would fall plant snapdragons. I would fall plant ranunculus. You can do another, I would fall plant them. So I have to look at my calendar. I'm sorry. I think we fall plant our ranunculus, like we force the corms to start to root, and then we transplant them. So they're going to start to have leaves on them when we put them in the ground. And that is going to be like, we're probably going to start planting those in early October, which means that any day now, I need to probably, not any day, middle of August, I need to start forcing them. And then I'll plant again, more ranunculus in February. So I do multiple plantings. And then I have really good luck with bells of Ireland. Really, they're super hardy, and also stock. But you could get away, I bet. I don't know if you could do stock in the fall, but you could 100% do stock early in the spring, like February or early March with a transplanted stock. I bet you also could overwinter rudbeckia, and rudbeckia is really hardy.
Yeah, so I got like, I didn't purposefully like even cover or protect any of my, well, of these plants anyways, but I had snaps and rudbeckia come back.
Yeah.
And bells of Ireland, it didn't like overwinter, but it reseeded itself. So that would probably be decent too. Okay. Thanks.
I've had pretty good luck with them overwintering. But I keep them from being frosted.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Yeah. Oh, you know what? There's another, and I kind of think of it, it's got a pretty little blue flower. But I mostly think of it as a filler. It's called Sorrenthe. And that really early spring seeded, like February. It's great. And it's always good to have a good filler, in March and April. And it's real hardy. It likes cool weather. Anything else? Are you guys still there, or did I lose ya?
We can hear you. Hopefully everyone's just racking their brains on a question.
Well, if there isn't anything else, I'm going to run because I need to eat lunch real quick and then get back out with my crew this afternoon.
Sounds great. Well, thank you so much for jumping on with us and being available to answer questions.
You're welcome.
Yes, thank you so
Yeah.
much.